Hello, everybody. It is Monday, December 30th. My name is Justin Ayers, and you are listening to the Bell Lap Podcast, where we talk about all things Grand Slam track. This is episode number 4. Make sure you hit the subscribe button or the follow button, depending on if you're listening on YouTube or Spotify. And also take a second to check us out on Instagram at the @BellLap_pod. We post different updates about Grand Slam track and about just what we're doing with the podcast in general. We hope you all had a great holiday season. Recording this, I guess, a couple days before New Year's. So hope you guys have a happy New Year and get to celebrate. And I hope Christmas and whatever holidays you guys are celebrating went fantastic as well. I don't know if it sounds different yet, but we did get some new equipment. I got a new microphone, and so hopefully it sounds a little more crisp for you all out there. And let's just jump into it. So Grand Slam track didn't really have any breaking news over the past week. They haven't made any announcements on who their challengers are yet, and I'm guessing they're probably going to wait a little longer before they make a full release there. There has been some conjecture among a bunch of different media sources about who might be joining in. I know I listened to Let's Run this morning, and host of that podcast seemed a little more optimistic than some others I've heard, that most of the big names that aren't included in the right now Grand Slam track roster are going to end up racing at some point. And so I guess that kind of puts almost everybody into play. And I've heard other interviews with different athletes kind of seem to take a bunch of the same sentiment, where an athlete's like, yeah, I'm not signed, but I'm hoping to hop into one. Later in that episode, they interviewed Nico Young. He's a distance runner and would be able to hop into the distance group really competitively, and he kind of had that same sentiment. I think that's what we're going to see among a lot of the maybe not top shelf star power athletes, but I think that it's going to be something that a lot of people hop into. Jury's still out, I think, on whether the top shelf of Holloway or Lyles or Richardson will get involved, but I think that at this point there's a lot of hope that there's going to be a lot of big names in that challenger list. One of the big announcements that did take place over the past week is that the Diamond League announced their new prize pool for their cash prize for top finishes at that competition. And so Diamond League has 15 meets throughout the year, and you get points throughout, I think, the first 14 to make a final. And so I think in total they are paying out about $9.4 million in prize money, even though it's about double that if you take in promotional and appearance fees. So different athletes like Ingebrigtsen might be getting a big sum of money, and I think Grand Slam track is doing this too, because Grand Slam track's total prize money for the full season comes out to about $12.6 million. But I don't think they've actually released any information on what their appearance fee is going to be for different athletes to show up. But I figured I'd go ahead and go over a rundown of each of the pay scales. So Grand Slam track, starting at the bottom, working its way up, you'll have $10,000 going to 8th place, 12.5 to 7, 15K to 6th, 20 to 5th place, 25 to 4th, 30 to 3, 50K to 2nd place, and then the highest prize across both leagues is the $100,000 first prize for a weekend event. And so when you get into the Diamond League, they have these diamond disciplines and non-diamond disciplines, and I think they said that would be kind of broken down a little more later. But when you look at the diamond disciplines, for a normal series meeting, it starts at 20 for first, and then it breaks down all the way to 9th. So that goes 20, 10, 6, 5, 3, 2.5, 2, 1,500, and then for 9th, it's 750. The final is more, so first place at the Diamond League final gets 50, then 20 for second, 10 for third, and then going down at 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. So just kind of basing off of it, I think that there's probably more of an opportunity if you're going to be somebody to compete in a bunch of meets at the Diamond League. Whereas Grand Slam track, because that first place prize is high, just based off prize money alone, that seems like the place where you want to race. Now, the hard thing is where we don't know what they're paying people in appearance fees, and because Diamond League has been very intentional about having a high amount invested in the appearance fees that they're paying the different athletes, that might be where Grand Slam track is lagging behind. There was the tweet that went viral saying that they offered 40K to a world class sprinter, and that was appalling to a lot of people. So that might be something that going forward they be a little more aggressive about, and maybe they don't keep this pay scale. But I also think that this pay scale is important because they want people competing for that first and second place prize, not necessarily going to just dish it all out just by having somebody show up. I do think it's worth saying, like, I think at the Diamond League there's semis, and you have the chance again to walk away with $750 or nothing, whereas in Grand Slam track every competitor is at least walking away with $10,000. And so there's a little more of a floor for some of the athletes who aren't as known at a top level. So it's going to be something to watch, this whole Diamond League versus Grand Slam track rivalry. Right now, obviously, the Diamond League's just been around for so long. It's more established. It's kind of taken over that whole eastern side of the globe, whereas Grand Slam track has an opportunity to be more competitive in the West. But today, jumping into our main topic, we're going to be going over the short sprinters on the women's side. And so these four women will be competing in the 100-meter dash and the 200-meter dash. Just off the top, this group consists of Melissa Jefferson, Darryl Neita, Gabby Thomas, and Brittany Brown. So starting off with Melissa Jefferson, we've got an Olympic gold medalist in the 4x1, bronze medalist in the 100, 2023 world champion in the 4x1, and also in 2022. Her Grand Slam event PRs, she ran a 1080 at the U.S. Trials, getting second. Sha'Carri Richardson, she ran the 200 in a 22.46 back in 2022. Born and raised in Georgetown, South Carolina, she definitely got into this at a young age and really grew up idolizing Allison Felix. The really cool story that you'll hear about Melissa Jefferson is that yes, she's a grinder and she's somebody who likes to work hard and compete at a very high level. But when she was 17 years old, her dad was diagnosed with leukemia and didn't have enough white blood cells in his bone marrow. And so she, in an interview I just watched, she said that like when that came back and they found out that he was sufficient and was going to need, she knew in that moment that she's going to have to donate her own. And she stepped up and was super willing and ready to make that sacrifice to save her dad's life, and he ended up recovering. And so just a very wholesome story, just a very wholesome individual. If you listen to some of her interviews, cares a lot about the teammates that she runs with, and just is very intentional and sets a high standard for success for herself within all of that. And so she did go to Coastal Carolina. She was the first person in their school's history to win an NCAA title. Like a number of these athletes that we followed, she decided to forego her senior year at the NCAA level and turn pro. And so she actually is coached by Dennis Mitchell, who works with Sha'Carri Richardson and Twanisha Terry. And what's really cool is that is 3/4 of the 4x1 on the Olympic gold medalist team this year. And so if you watch that race, you've got Jefferson, who actually takes it out of the blocks and keeps them in. Then she hands off to Terry, who then gives it to Thomas, and then who would finished it off with Richardson. And so definitely was able to find that success at a really high level. And I don't think that a person who gets gold in a relay should ever be discounted, but I think that it's so interesting that the U.S. has this huge following that's gone to Sha'Carri Richardson over the past few years. And I know some of that has came a little bit off the track, but um, when you look at that final, Melissa Jefferson was right there, right behind Richardson in that 100-meter final when she took bronze and Richardson got silver. Um, Jefferson's a little more just fully sound in Jefferson's like competition. She's very fast, but also she can come out of the blocks well, run a whole race. And in that race, she did steal the bronze medal almost with a great lean. If you watch that final and pause it at the moment when everybody's starting to finish the race, she is so much out further than all the other runners. And that's such a huge advantage, being such a tactical, smart racer in an event like sprinting, where a fraction of a second can make a huge difference. And so when you compare that to Richardson, Richardson's probably the fastest woman in the world when it comes to the ability to hit a high speed, but she doesn't come out of the blocks at the same level as some of the other competitors did. And so I would be so interested if Richardson hadn't competed this year to see if Jefferson's popularity could have grown even more. Now, maybe without Richardson, they don't win that gold medal in the 4x1, and there isn't as much spotlight that goes to that team, but it's just something interesting. Now, the one thing that Jefferson's going to have to do is she's going to have to run the 200 if she's running in the sprint group, and she hasn't ran on an elite level in the 200 in a while, and she carries the slowest PR. Let me double check this, but I'm pretty sure she carries the slowest PR over 200 meters than all the other athletes in this group. Looking at Thomas, I think Gabby Thomas and Brittany Brown are nearly a full second faster at the moment, because they both clock in, okay, half second faster. That's more correct. So they both can have ran under 22 seconds, whereas Brown's fastest 200 right now is a 22.46. So there's definitely going to be some ground she's going to have to make up in the 200 if she wants to compete with these others across the weekend for the standings. However, on the flip side, she does carry that advantage where she's probably the best 100-meter runner in this group. Now, Thomas is not really focused on the 100, so she's a little bit of a wild card, and we'll get into her. I guess we'll get into her next. And so, with Gabby Thomas, you have this loads of success in the 200 and 400. Winning gold, was a part of the 4x4 team that won. 28 years old, so she's still young and has years to continue to thrive. Whereas I will say, I don't know if I mentioned this, Jefferson's 23. She's definitely the youngest in this group, and she's probably the one who in 4 years could make another run at winning gold in the 100-meter dash, as long as she's able to continue to train healthy and improve. But she's going to have to run against some really competitive 200-meter runners. And so starting with Thomas, you've got gold in the 200, gold in the 4x1, gold in the 4x4 at this Olympics alone. She won gold in the 4x1 in 2023 and silver in the 200. She also got bronze in the 200 and silver in the 4x1 back in Tokyo. She was this year's Jackie Joyner Kersey Female Athlete of the Year, which is a pretty big deal in track and field. And so just absolutely dominated in every race she stepped on the track at the Olympics. And so comparing the two a little bit, you've got Thomas, whose 200-meter dash time PR sits at 21.6, which that's about, like I said, a half second faster. However, the best 100 ran by Thomas right now is at 11 seconds flat 3 years ago. That's at least the fastest time that I was able to find. And so Jefferson got her in the 100 by 0.2 of a second. So they kind of are a little more of a duel against each other when it comes to the one and the two. Now, Thomas is very competitive in the 400 as well, and so there's been some speculation with Gabby Thomas if she might in one of the slams bump up a group and compete in the long sprints group that'll run the 200 and the 400, because it seems like that's a little more to her strengths, since that's what she's medaled in previously. However, she was part of the 4x1 and the 100 speeds there, and so this could be one of those things where she's testing the water in the 100 to see if maybe that's something she's going for as she looks to these next few world championships. And so the background on Gabby Thomas, who is probably the second biggest star in Grand Slam track, if I had to put my opinion on it. Thomas was born in Atlanta, was just this super athlete, competed in a number of sports, also was inspired by Allison Felix. Thomas would go to compete collegiately at Harvard, where she was dominant in the Ivy League and won 22 conference titles. Ended up forgoing her senior year to run with New Balance. As I'm reading this, there's a lot of parallels kind of between what Melissa Jefferson did as she was getting into the sport and Gabby Thomas and what she did as she was getting into the sport. But awesome fact about Thomas is that she graduated from Harvard with a degree in neurobiology and global health, later got a master's from the University of Texas in epidemiology. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree as her mom has a PhD, but does it on the track and also can do it in the classroom, I guess. But Thomas, as she turned pro, goes international at the 2019 World Relays, and then hops into the Olympic trials in 2021 and kind of shocks everybody. Runs the second fastest 200 time ever at that moment in time, wins the U.S. trials, goes to the Olympics, gets silver in the 200, which I think eyes were probably on gold, and so there was this big build up to this past Olympics when she competed in that 200 meter final. You hear the commentators going like, can Gabby Thomas finally get her gold medal? Like, can she finally win her title? Can she be the best in the world? And so obviously she proved that she was and won that 200 meter dash final in just dominant fashion. It really was never close. The big competition was Julian Alfred, who had won the 100 meter gold medal, and Thomas had her by the turn, and then when they hit that final straightaway, there was never really a question. Now, Alfred, in their own right, Julian Alfred was clearly the second best, and then after that, Brittany Brown, who we'll talk about in a second, kind of was a little further off them. But Thomas is just a dominant runner. Seems like tall and staggers over almost everybody, even though I don't think she's that much different, but her legs are just able to capture so much distance, and her stride has such a fast turnover that, man, she just propels herself forward and just has the ability to run so fast. But it's kind of like I said now for Jefferson, is Thomas ready to run a world-class 100? And I think it'd be stupid for somebody to bet no, but you've got this stud athlete in the 2 and the 4 who she's ran a 49.68. So really, you almost wonder, is she closer to the Olympic medal stand in the open 4 than in the open 100? And so this is a race that I am super intrigued to see her run, is the 100 meter dash, and see how she compares, because clearly she is able to get up to speed and contain it for a while. But if in the 100 you aren't able to get out fast and have a great 30 first meters, or at least keep yourself in contention, you can fall behind and have too much ground to make up. So moving on to the second half, we'll go ahead and round it out with the Americans, and look at Brittany Brown, a 29-year-old bronze medalist in the 200 at the past year. Brown has also won the one of the Diamond League matchups in 2024 in the 200. Got 7th at the 100 meter dash in World Championships last year, and also has a silver 200 meter medal from 2019. And so her Grand Slam track event PRs is a 10.9 in the 100. There was on there listed that she's ran a 10.6, which would be way out in front of everybody else, but that was noted as not being win legal. And in the 200, she's ran a 21.9. So she joins Thomas as the only other athlete who has actually ran under 22 seconds in this group. And so the 200 is definitely going to be one of her powerhouses. And so, the background for Brown, grew up in California, Claremont High School. She definitely prides herself on being this underdog. She was very successful. It would be, I think, naive to say that there wasn't some excess there. She ended up being an 11-time All-American when she was in college. However, she never won a state title, never won a national title, and as she graduated, there wasn't this big recruitment by these pro brands to sign her to a deal. And so she left the University of Iowa, where she was very successful, but she wasn't on the same level that you kind of see with a bunch of these other athletes. And a lot of these athletes, you kind of start hearing the same story of national champion, area champion, country's champion, like they've won these big meets and then that's propelled them to the Olympic team and then they move on from there. Whereas Brittany Brown never quite had that similar trajectory. And so she actually graduates and works as an Alzheimer's caregiver because she wasn't working as a sponsored runner full time, and she's training while she's doing that. And so she keeps training, ends up qualifying for Worlds, and then is able to get a small deal with Adidas and performs very well at the World Championships in 2019 and earns herself a silver medal. And so at that point, she's made her international debut, hits the podium, and then goes to Tokyo. Doesn't even make it out of the semifinals. And so I'm not completely sure what happened with that race. Now, there is some documented history that in the time between 2019 and 2023, Brown dealt with a number of injuries, and she also got diagnosed with endometriosis, which I'm not going to go into the specifics of the disease, but it brings about a ton of nausea and GI issues, which any runner knows that can just devastate a performance when you're trying to run through something like that. And so she has to fight through all of this stuff, and then she finally makes it back to the world stage in 2023, makes finals, ends up getting like 7th place, which I'm sure she wasn't overly thrilled with. However, it kind of reestablished herself back as one of the top sprinters in the game. And then she was able to take that momentum, parlay it into the Olympic trials this year, where she ends up getting second, I believe, at the U.S. Olympic trials in the 200 meters, makes the team, lands this deal with Nike, goes to the Olympics, and the rest is history. Has a couple phenomenal races, and it pulls her through in the 200 to get the bronze medal. And so Brown's got this whole backstory of just overcoming adversity and being able to kind of surprise people. The one thing that I'm interested to see is Brittany Brown able to have a competitive enough 100 where maybe she's the favorite, because I don't know with Gabby Thomas's ability to run a 100, since that hasn't been as documented. Yes, she's had some phenomenal splits in the 4x1, but with the running start, that does change things. Whereas if she's going to come out of blocks, is Brittany Brown able to maybe nab second? Maybe Jefferson wins, Brown nabs second, and then also brings it back in the 200, gets second, and then all of a sudden she's won a Grand Slam, and she sees herself on top of gold medalist Thomas. And I think that's a real possibility here, because she has that 10.9 second 100. The 100 has just not been as big of a focus for her. So if she's able to be competitive in the 100, she also doesn't have a huge history of doubling. As I've looked through a number of these meets, normally it's 200, and that's kind of what she does. And she'll compete at the semis, which there's this big, I guess, hype about Grand Slam track athletes who are doubling, when if you think about some of the big championship competitions they do, they are running multiple times, multiple days anyways, so it's not really that different. It is, I think, a little more for some of the longer events, but like for some of these sprinters, especially in the one and the two, to do two races in 3 days, 4 times a year, I don't think that that's going to be super overwhelming for some of these athletes who are not as strong as doubling. Not to say, though, that people who have experience doubling and being super successful at it should be taken for granted. And so that's kind of the American story. This is a really competitive group of American runners. Yeah, you're missing out on the top name and probably maybe the second top name with Sha'Carri Richardson and Twinnie Shateri. However, um, you can't really ask for much more with the three you've got there. Um, then there's the last one, which you can go hop across the pond all the way to Great Britain for Darryl Neita, 28-year-old, and she's kind of been Great Britain's diamond child for a while. I mean, there's a long list of medals that she carries, so I'll run through these fast. 2017 silver 4x1 in the World Championships, 2016 Olympic 4x1 medal, 2019 silver 4x1 World Championships, 2020 bronze in the 4x1 at the Olympics, 2023 4x1 bronze at the World Championships, 2024 silver medalist in the 4x1. She's got 5 European Championships medals, including gold in 2018 and in 2024 in the 4x1. So you're kind of seeing 4x1's definitely her bread and butter. However, while she's medaled in those events, she had a very strong double this year in the Olympics in the 100 and the 200, where she got fourth. Barely was out-leaned by Jefferson in the 100, and then she got fifth in the 200-meter dash. So was able to compete at a very high level in those two events at the Olympics, and looks super strong doing it. So Grand Slam event PRs. This was another one where, looking at the World Athletics website, I think that 10.9 was her official PR. 10.8 was the best time she's ran, but not win legal. Her 200 time is third in this group with 22.16, which she did back in 2023. And so a little background on her, which it was hard to find a bunch of background on her, whereas the three Americans, you could just kind of look them up. And so I had to go dig a little deeper, and so I found an article from CP Times that just kind of gave me this information. And so Neita was born in London, raised by a single mother who she gives a lot of credit to her mother for getting her involved in a lot of different activities and giving her a sense of structure in her life. But she also credits her mother for teaching her how to be a very resilient person in general, athletics besides. And so her mom encouraged her at a very young age to get into running, and she starts competing and she likes it. And then the London Olympics occur when she's 16, and this is in her hometown where she's grown up, and she's watching people get gold medals right down the street from her. And this is when it starts to set in for her, where she's like, oh, I think that can be me. And so she takes her competition much more seriously moving forward, ends up winning medals at the English School Championships, and I think wins 1 gold medal at those. She moves on, goes to Oakland College, and competes in the Wolves Athletic Academy. Through her training and competition with that group, she ends up making the U20 European Championship team in 2015, and then the next year she went back to that race and medals in the 100 in 2016. After that, she goes on and makes her debut on an international stage, a part of all of these relays, and really as a pro athlete, the rest is history. And so she's very successful, especially on the European side. And so now I think the big thing is she able to shed the relays and make the success happen for herself, because she is a great doubler And this is the event that really plays to her strengths, because if she's able to snag a couple of the athletes and finish very high, that could be enough with how the point structures work to put her at the top of the Grand Slams. It also is going to give her more experience running against these high caliber athletes in the 1 and the 200. And that's something that Johnson harped on a lot about these, is that these athletes who are signing contracts to run in all 4 Grand Slams are going to be able to compete against some of the best 4 times a year. So they're going to get a lot more experience in championship style racing. So the other thing that she expressed a lot of interest in is there is some incentive that she feels internally that she wants to be the best sprinter in British history. Her best 100-meter time that she's ever ran is only 0.1 behind the British record, which was set by Dina Asher-Smith. And so there is a little bit of a time incentive that she has put on herself moving forward. And you don't always see that with some of these professional athletes. A lot of them have ran the times that a lot of them want to, and their goals are a little more performance-based, like getting a medal or getting a spot high at the World Championships or at the Olympics. But she's also incentivized to run fast, and I think that that's something that Johnson probably loves, and he's probably hoping that this is something that can happen, that he can market moving forward for Grand Slam track, is she could become the fastest woman in British history. And so there's a lot more time-based goals with this group as well. So it's a really, I think, stacked group. I think this is a very strong lineup so far, and I really think that with the nature of a sprint in a 100, I feel a little more confident about some of the people who are missing showing up to this race, as opposed to something like a distance event where it takes a lot more wear and tear on your body to run a double like is being requested at the Grand Slam track meets. And so the 3 big names that I think are missing, Sha'Carri Richardson, 24-year-old American, a lot of people know who she is, probably the biggest female track star in the United States. I'd say it's either her or McLaughlin. I think there are a lot of people that would argue that it's definitely Richardson, but a quick rundown of her accolades. You've got the 100-meter Olympic silver this year, 4x1 gold. She actually has the NCAA 100-meter record, which she set as a freshman in college, and then she is 2023 world champion. You got Julian Alfred, who made huge headlines this year at the Olympics because she became the first person to ever medal from St. Lucia when she won the 100-meter gold medal, and she's also just 23. And so Richardson and Alfred are both very young, and a lot of people, I think, probably are already preparing for them to race again at the Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028. And so it would be really cool to see if Grand Slam track could get both of them on the track racing against each other as almost like a rematch. But last thing, and it is noteworthy, and I think a lot of people were talking about the group that makes up the Grand Slam track sprinters on the female side doesn't include any Jamaicans. And so Sharika Jackson, who is one of the fastest 200-meter runners of all time, then she has medaled at the World Championships in 2022 and 2023. I think she won gold. She also won gold in 2020 in the 4x1, and is an 11-time world champion medalist in general and has 5 Olympic medals. Worth noting, too, that 2023 medal that she got in the World Championships, I believe, was over Gabby Thomas. So she definitely has the background to step into this group and be very competitive. And so initial rankings, I think this group is very intriguing because of how they all seem to have a great background and a great successful resume in one event that they're representing, but none of them are overly dominant at both. Neita is the only one who was top 5 in both at the Olympic Games this past summer. So Right now, I got Thomas at the top, which I didn't feel great about this pick because I do think that they'll get her to branch out, so I think this might be a little more non-traditional for her to be in this for the full entire year. But I think the 100 will be fine. Like I'm sure that um, she will pop out and run a sub 11 at one of these slams, and everyone's gonna be like, "Oh yeah, she is in the running for fastest woman in the world." And then I think she'll take care of business in the two. I actually don't think anybody is really going to mess with her in the 200. And so I think that she's going to be able to win the two, place high enough in the one that she'll be on top. Now, I actually think that Brittany Brown stands the best, in my opinion, to round out the runner up in this spot. I do think that she is the best poised to get probably second in this group in the um, one and the two. I think she's going to be the best doubler when this is all said and done. At third, I have Darryl Neita. In fourth, I have Jefferson. Um, I'm a little worried about Jefferson in the 200, and so I'm super excited for her to come out and absolutely prove me wrong and rise up the scale. I think Nita is going to be a great doubler. I just don't know if she's got the top end speed right now to beat Brown and Thomas. And so I think I'm being a little biased maybe to the 200-meter runners. And this is definitely, as I think that Richardson and Alfred will end up at some of these meets, that will really mess with how this turns out. Because if they show up, that could push down the amount of points that like Thomas and Brown could earn, whereas Jefferson can hang with Richardson and Alfred in a lot more competitive manner, and that could push her up. And so this group really, I think, depends on the talent that's there, but that's kind of how I see it going right now. I do think that Jefferson is young, and I think that she could be one of those athletes that come the end of the slams is running way more competitively than she is at the beginning, whereas these other three athletes have been doing this for years and kind of know what they bring to the table. And so do you think it's worth noting that Gabby Thomas is just huge for Grand Slam track? I think the debate continues right now among a lot of track fans about whether this thing is going to be successful. And I do think that having somebody like Gabby Thomas, that was kind of the signing when they signed her that they needed, because they're cranking out these names and they start the list with these great 400 runners, and they've got these 1500-meter men's podium basically after the Olympics happen. It's basically all the Grand Slam track athletes who finish on top. And then it kind of goes quiet, and then they say Thomas, and it kind of doubled down that this is a league that is going to be very competitive. Now, whether people latch on in the United States and beyond, buy the product and actually want to give their time to watch these athletes run is one thing, but I think Thomas, being an established runner who's going to be there multiple times a year, really helps solidify the women's side of things. So that's how I see it. If you feel differently about the rankings I threw down there, I'd love to hear them, so you can comment those in the video below. Again, please give us a follow on YouTube or Spotify, and check us out on YouTube at the @BellApp_pod. Again, my name is Justin Ayers, and I hope you guys had a fantastic holiday. And I look forward to talking with you guys next week. Hopefully we get a little bit of news in the meantime, but if we don't, I hope you guys have great New Year's, spend some more time with family and friends, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one.